The summer of 2023 brought record-breaking tourism to Egypt's Red Sea coastline, with Hurghada's pristine beaches drawing visitors from across Europe and the Middle East. Among them was 29-year-old Lena Kowalczyk, a Polish-Ukrainian marine biologist who was 5 months pregnant with her first child. Hurghada had evolved from a small fishing village in the 1980s into an internationally renowned resort destination, its warm waters and vibrant coral reefs attracting divers and sunbathers alike. Local authorities prided themselves on the area's safety record, despite occasional reports of increased shark activity in recent years. Lena and her husband, Tomasz Kowalczyk, had chosen Hurghada for what they expected would be their final vacation before parenthood. The couple had met 6 years earlier while studying at the University of Warsaw and shared a passion for marine ecosystems. Though aware of her condition, Lena's professional background gave her confidence in the water, perhaps more than caution warranted. July 15th began like any other day at the Coral Paradise Resort, with tourists claiming poolside loungers and beach attendants arranging rows of colorful umbrellas along the shoreline. The temperature had already reached 98 degrees Fahrenheit by mid-morning, driving most visitors into the refreshing waters of the Red Sea. Resort staff noted nothing unusual, though several local fishermen had mentioned unusual fish migration patterns during the previous week. What none of the tourists knew was that approximately 2 miles offshore, a commercial fishing vessel had been illegally dumping fish waste and bycatch for several weeks. The practice, though prohibited by Egyptian maritime regulations, saved the operation significant disposal costs. These actions had gradually altered the feeding behavior of several bull sharks that typically remained in deeper waters, conditioning them to associate the shoreline with easy meals. At around 11:45 a.m., Lena waded into the calm, shallow waters near the resort's private beach. Tomasz had returned to their room to retrieve their underwater camera, leaving Lena floating peacefully in water barely waist-deep. Several children played nearby, their laughter carrying across the water as their parents watched from the shore. The 2.8-meter bull shark, a species notorious for its ability to tolerate fresh water and its unpredictable aggression, approached from deeper water, remaining invisible against the sandy bottom. Marine biologists would later determine that the shark was a mature female, likely drawn by the combination of fish waste in the water and the movements of swimmers. Witnesses reported that Lena showed no signs of distress until the moment of impact. The bull shark struck with explosive force, targeting her lower torso with devastating precision. The initial bite severed her femoral artery and tore through her lower abdomen, causing catastrophic trauma. Lena's scream cut through the ambient beach noise, instantly transforming the idyllic scene into chaos. Ahmed Mustafa, a resort lifeguard with 8 years of experience, was the first to respond. He later recounted how the water around Lena had already turned dark red by the time he reached her, just 20 seconds after the initial attack. Other tourists scrambled to evacuate the water, parents frantically grabbing children as panic spread across the beach. Tomasz, returning from their room, heard the commotion and dropped everything, running toward the shore. By the time he reached the water's edge, Ahmed and another tourist, a German emergency room doctor named Katharina Müller, were already dragging Lena's unconscious form onto the sand. Dr. Müller immediately began emergency procedures, but the blood loss had been too severe and too rapid. Despite their efforts, Lena was pronounced dead at the scene. Medical authorities later confirmed that both she and her unborn child had died within minutes of the attack. The resort closed its beaches immediately, and within hours, all neighboring facilities followed suit. Egyptian tourism authorities, concerned about the impact on the region's reputation, launched an investigation into the incident. Within 3 days, they discovered the illegal dumping operation and arrested the captain and first mate of the fishing vessel, Al-Maher. Marine biologists from Cairo University's Oceanographic Institute, led by Dr. Fatima El-Sadawi, conducted extensive surveys of the coastal waters in the weeks following the tragedy. Their research revealed that water temperatures had risen 2.3 degrees Celsius above historical averages for July, disrupting traditional feeding patterns among larger predatory fish. Combined with the illegal dumping, these factors had created what Dr. El-Sadawi termed a perfect storm of risk factors. Tomasz Kowalczyk, devastated by the loss of both his wife and unborn child, established the Lena Kowalczyk Foundation for Marine Safety the following year. The organization focused on educating tourists about marine predators and advocating for stricter enforcement of waste disposal regulations in coastal waters worldwide. The attack prompted Egyptian authorities to implement one of the most comprehensive shark monitoring systems in the world, including aerial drones and underwater acoustic tracking devices. These measures, while unable to bring back Lena and her child, potentially prevented similar tragedies in the years that followed. In a cruel irony, Lena's doctoral research had focused on changing shark migration patterns in response to human activity and climate change. Her colleagues at the University of Warsaw posthumously published her findings, which included predictions about increased shark-human encounters in previously uncommon locations. The Coral Paradise Resort remained closed for 3 months following the incident, reopening only after installing extensive safety measures, including underwater nets and electronic shark deterrent systems. Despite these precautions, tourist numbers remained significantly depressed for the next 2 seasons. Local fishermen in Hurghada reported capturing the bull shark responsible for the attack approximately 2 weeks later, though marine biologists expressed skepticism about the claim, noting the difficulty of positively identifying specific individuals without distinctive markings. 5 years after the tragedy, a small memorial plaque was installed at the resort's entrance, bearing Lena's name and a simple message in multiple languages: "Respect the sea and its creatures." The plaque served as a quiet reminder of how quickly paradise can transform into catastrophe when human activity disrupts natural marine ecosystems. For Tomás, who never returned to Hurghada, the memories of that July day remained painfully vivid. Through his foundation's work, he found some measure of purpose in transforming personal tragedy into public awareness, ensuring that Lena's expertise in marine biology continued to protect others, even after her death. In April 2019, the remote Ba Atoll in the Maldives presented a pristine underwater paradise that had attracted divers and marine enthusiasts for decades. The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization Biosphere Reserve, established in 2011, encompassed some of the Indian Ocean's most spectacular coral ecosystems, drawing researchers and adventurers eager to document its biodiversity. The area's isolation, approximately 120 kilometers northwest of the capital Male, had largely preserved its marine habitats from excessive tourism impact, though increasing water temperatures had begun affecting coral health in recent years. 34-year-old Marco Alvarez, a renowned underwater photographer and free diving instructor from Barcelona, had chosen the Ba Atoll for his latest documentary project focusing on reef ecosystems in transition. With 3 international photography awards and publications in National Geographic, Marco had developed a reputation for capturing marine life with remarkable intimacy, often diving without supplemental oxygen to create less disturbance in delicate environments. Marco had been staying at the Nautilus Resort for 9 days, establishing a daily routine of morning dives along the outer reef where blacktip reef sharks commonly patrolled. The resort's marine biologist, Dr. Farah Nassim, had advised Marco about the area's shark population, noting that while reef sharks were common and generally non-threatening, larger pelagic species occasionally passed through the channels between atolls during seasonal migrations. On the morning of April 17th, Marco set out alone in one of the resort's smaller boats, heading toward a site locally known as Shark Point, despite its relatively few shark sightings in recent years. Weather conditions were ideal: calm seas, excellent visibility, and minimal current. Marco anchored approximately 800 meters from the reef edge, where the seafloor dropped dramatically from 15 to over 600 meters, creating upwellings that attracted diverse marine life. After checking his equipment, a simple mask, fins, weight belt, and underwater camera housed in a specialized carbon fiber casing, Marco performed his pre-dive breathing exercises. His fitness tracker, later recovered from the boat, recorded his heart rate dropping to a measured 48 beats per minute, demonstrating the physiological control that had allowed him to hold his breath for over 6 minutes in competition settings. Marco slipped into the water at 9:42 a.m., descending slowly along the reef wall. His camera's timestamp showed that he spent approximately 12 minutes photographing a school of fusiliers before moving deeper toward a coral formation at 24 meters. The remarkable clarity of the water allowed sunlight to penetrate to this depth, creating ideal conditions for photography. What Marco failed to notice was the large female tiger shark that had entered the area from the deep channel to the north. Later analysis of his recovered camera footage showed the 4-meter predator appearing briefly in the background of several frames before the encounter, suggesting it had been tracking him for at least 3 minutes. According to marine biologists who reviewed the incident, tiger sharks are known for their cautious initial approach to unfamiliar objects. The shark likely observed Marco from a distance, assessing whether he represented potential prey. Tiger sharks possess among the most varied diets of all shark species, occasionally investigating objects that don't fit their typical prey profile. At approximately 10:07 a.m., as Marco ascended to replenish his air supply, the tiger shark accelerated toward him with remarkable speed. Unlike the stealthy approach typical of hunting sharks, this charge appeared more consistent with territorial behavior. The shark struck Marco with tremendous force, slamming into his torso rather than biting initially, a behavior sometimes observed when sharks are investigating rather than feeding. The impact knocked the air from Marco's lungs, momentarily disorienting him at a depth of approximately 10 meters. Before he could recover, the shark circled back and grabbed his right fin, pulling him deeper in a spiraling motion. Marco later reported that his training immediately took over, suppressing panic as he focused on protecting his vital areas while attempting to maintain orientation. After what Marco estimated to be 20 seconds, but camera timestamps confirmed was only 8 seconds, the shark abruptly released him and vanished into deeper water. Whether distracted by the taste of neoprene rather than flesh or simply completing an investigative behavior, the shark's departure allowed Marco to kick toward the surface. As he ascended, Marco noticed blood clouding the water around his right calf, where the shark's teeth had penetrated his wetsuit during the struggle. Despite the injury, he maintained sufficient composure to make a controlled ascent, avoiding the additional danger of decompression sickness. Upon reaching his boat, Marco applied a compression bandage from his emergency kit to the 18-centimeter laceration on his calf. The wound, though bleeding profusely, had fortunately missed major arteries. He immediately radioed the resort, reporting both his injury and the shark's presence in the area. The resort's emergency response team, led by Dr. Nassim and dive master Hussein Rashid, reached Marco within 17 minutes. By this time, he had secured his equipment and maintained pressure on the wound, actions that medical staff later credited with preventing substantial blood loss. At the Nautilus Resort's medical facility, Dr. Aishath Shafeu cleaned and assessed the wound, determining that while deep, it required only suturing rather than major surgical intervention. Marco received 27 stitches along with antibiotics to prevent infection, a significant concern with shark bite injuries due to bacteria present in marine environments. Marine biologists investigating the incident concluded that the attack was likely territorial rather than predatory. Dr. Nassim noted that tiger sharks rarely exhibited such behavior in the region, suggesting that changing ocean conditions might be altering traditional shark movement patterns and behaviors. Water temperature readings from the area had shown a 1.8 degrees Celsius increase compared to historical April averages, potentially influencing prey distribution and shark migration routes. Marco's recovery progressed quickly, though he abstained from returning to the water during his remaining time in the Maldives. The footage recovered from his camera provided valuable documentation of the encounter, which he later shared with shark researchers studying predator behavior. 6 months after the incident, Marco published an article in Diver magazine detailing his experience and emphasizing the importance of diving with partners in remote locations. He noted that while the encounter had been terrifying, it reinforced his respect for these apex predators, rather than instilling fear. The Maldivian Tourism Authority implemented enhanced shark monitoring in the Ba Atoll following the incident, including regular drone surveys and acoustic tracking of larger shark species. For Marco Alvarez, the scars on his calf served as a permanent reminder of the unpredictability of wild encounters and the importance of proper training when facing the ocean's most efficient predators. The autumn of 2022 brought unusually warm water temperatures to California's central coast, extending the swimming season well into October. Monterey Bay, renowned for its deep submarine canyon and diverse marine ecosystem, had long attracted both swimmers and marine life enthusiasts. The area's complex underwater topography, with the canyon reaching depths of over 3,000 meters just offshore, created nutrient-rich upwellings that supported a remarkable food chain, from microscopic plankton to the bay's largest seasonal visitors, great white sharks. 42-year-old Benjamin Harrington, a software engineer and endurance athlete, had moved to Pacific Grove 5 years earlier, drawn by the area's natural beauty and outdoor recreation opportunities. An accomplished triathlete who had completed 3 Ironman competitions, Ben regularly trained in Monterey Bay's open waters, typically swimming 3 to 5 kilometers several mornings each week. His route often took him parallel to Lovers Point Beach, following a course popular among local distance swimmers. October 17th began like many of Ben's training days. He arrived at the beach shortly after sunrise, when the morning fog still clung to the coastline and few others were present. The water temperature registered at 63 degrees Fahrenheit, warmer than usual for mid-October, but still requiring his 3mm wetsuit for comfortable extended swimming. Local marine conditions reports had noted increased sea lion activity in the bay, though Ben paid little attention to this detail as he performed his usual stretching routine on the beach. What Ben didn't know was that the past week had seen several juvenile elephant seals haul out on nearby beaches, unusual behavior indicating possible distress or disorientation among the pinnipeds. Marine biologists from the Monterey Bay Aquarium had documented this anomaly, but had not yet determined its cause. More critically, a 4.8-meter great white shark had been tracked entering the bay 3 days earlier, its presence detected by underwater acoustic receivers placed by Stanford University's Shark Research Program. At around 6:45 a.m., Ben entered the water and began his steady, measured freestyle stroke toward the outer buoy that marked the beginning of his typical training route. The morning's calm conditions allowed him to establish his rhythm quickly, and he soon settled into the meditative state that long-distance swimmers often describe, focused solely on breath, stroke, and the surrounding water. 20 minutes into his swim, approximately 600 meters from shore, Ben felt a sudden pressure change in the water beneath him. Having grown up swimming in Hawaii's shark-populated waters, he recognized the sensation instantly, a large object displacing water as it moved upward. Before he could react, a massive shadow passed directly beneath him, its size and speed unmistakable. The 4.9-meter female great white shark, later identified by researchers through bite pattern analysis, rose from the depths with deliberate purpose. Great whites typically hunt by approaching from below, using their countershading, dark above, light below, as camouflage against the ocean floor and sky respectively. The initial attack struck Ben's lower left leg with immense force, the shark's upper teeth sinking into his calf muscle while lower teeth punctured his wetsuit just above his ankle. Ben later described experiencing not pain but overwhelming pressure in those first seconds, followed by the sudden sensation of being pulled underwater. Drawing on his extensive water experience, he instinctively struck the shark's snout with his right fist, a defensive technique he had learned years earlier during ocean safety training in Hawaii. The blow, delivered with adrenaline-fueled strength, momentarily disoriented the predator. In the brief moment the shark released its grip, Ben kicked frantically toward the surface, his damaged leg trailing blood that billowed in the clear morning water. Breaking the surface, he immediately began shouting for help, while attempting to orient himself toward the nearest shore. The shark circled below, its distinctive dorsal fin cutting the surface approximately 10 meters away before disappearing from view. On shore, early morning jogger Priya Deshmukh, a cardiac nurse at Community Hospital of the Monterey Peninsula, heard Ben's cries and immediately alerted 2 nearby surfers, Joaquin Valdez and Timothy Nguyen. Without hesitation, both men paddled toward Ben, reaching him within 2 minutes. Joaquin later reported seeing the shark's shadow pass beneath his board as they helped Ben position himself across Timothy's longer surfboard. Working together, the surfers managed to paddle Ben toward shore while Priya called emergency services. As they approached the shallows, 4 additional beachgoers waded into the water to help carry Ben onto the beach. Priya immediately applied pressure to Ben's wound, using a beach towel as an improvised tourniquet above the bite, which had lacerated his calf muscle and damaged his tibial artery. Paramedics arrived within 8 minutes, stabilizing Ben before transporting him to Natividad Medical Center in Salinas, which housed the area's Level 2 trauma center. The emergency surgical team, led by Dr. Elena Rodriguez, worked for over 5 hours to repair vascular damage and stabilize the extensive soft tissue trauma. While the injury was severe, involving significant muscle and tendon damage, the team succeeded in saving Ben's leg. Marine biologists from California State University, Monterey Bay investigated the incident, concluding that the unusual concentration of young elephant seals in the area had likely attracted the shark to typically human-populated waters. Dr. Marcus Yamashita, who led the investigation, noted that the shark's behavior, a single investigative bite followed by release, was consistent with cases of mistaken identity, where sharks confuse swimmers, particularly those in wetsuits, with their natural pinniped prey. Following the attack, local authorities closed beaches along a 10-mile stretch of coastline for 7 days while conducting aerial surveys to track shark movements. The attack prompted county officials to accelerate the deployment of an artificial intelligence-powered shark detection system that had been under consideration for several years. Using underwater cameras and machine learning algorithms, the system could distinguish between sharks and other marine life, alerting lifeguards to potential dangers. Ben's recovery proved challenging but ultimately successful. After 3 weeks in the hospital and 6 months of intensive physical therapy, he regained approximately 80% of function in his injured leg. Though doctors advised against returning to open water swimming, Ben eventually resumed training in protected pool environments and later became an advocate for shark conservation, often reminding audiences that he was visiting their home, not the other way around. In a remarkable gesture of scientific contribution, Ben donated tissue samples from his wetsuit to Stanford's Shark Research Program, allowing scientists to analyze the shark's deoxyribonucleic acid and contribute to the ongoing database of great white populations along the California coast. The data helped researchers identify the specific shark as a previously tagged female that typically frequented waters further north near the Farallon Islands. The following year, Ben collaborated with the Monterey Bay Aquarium to develop a public education program about shark behavior and ocean safety. For Ben, the experience transformed him from victim to advocate, reinforcing his connection to the marine environment, even as it reminded him of its inherent risks and the importance of respecting the ocean's apex predators. 2004. The morning had started promisingly for 34-year-old fisherman Michael Andrews. With years of experience navigating the waters off the coast of Mozambique, he had set out alone in his small fishing boat, a weathered but reliable vessel that had served him well for nearly a decade. The skies were clear and weather reports had predicted favorable conditions, perfect for a day's catch to sell at the local market in Pemba. By midday, Michael had ventured nearly 15 miles offshore, following a promising school of yellowfin tuna. His small craft, though modest, was equipped with basic navigation equipment and emergency supplies, standard precautions for someone who understood the unpredictable nature of the Indian Ocean. What the weather reports had failed to predict, however, was the rapid formation of a storm system moving in from the northeast. The first indication of trouble came when Michael noticed the darkening skies on the horizon. Having grown up near these waters, he recognized the telltale signs of an approaching squall and immediately began preparations to return to shore. But nature proved faster than his small outboard motor could manage. Within 30 minutes, the previously calm sea transformed into a churning mass of whitecaps and swells. As the storm intensified, waves grew to 12 feet in height, battering the small fishing vessel relentlessly. Michael struggled to maintain control, fighting against the powerful forces pushing his boat sideways into the dangerous trough between waves. Despite his experience and skill, a particularly massive wave struck the boat broadside, capsizing it almost instantly. The sudden violence of the capsizing threw Michael into the turbulent waters. Gasping and disoriented, he surfaced to find his boat overturned and rapidly taking on water. Years of maritime experience had taught him to remain calm in emergencies. He quickly assessed his situation, gathering what floating debris he could reach, primarily a large section of the boat's wooden deck that had broken loose in the impact. Michael clung to this makeshift raft for hours as the storm gradually subsided. By nightfall, the immediate danger of drowning had passed, but he found himself adrift in open ocean, miles from the nearest shoreline with no means of propulsion or communication. His emergency locator beacon had been stored in a compartment of the boat that was now inaccessible beneath the waves. The first night passed slowly, with Michael conserving his energy and rationing the single bottle of water that had miraculously stayed in his pocket throughout the ordeal. He knew that in these warm waters, dehydration posed as significant a threat as drowning. As dawn broke on the second day, the full gravity of his situation became clear. No vessels were visible on the horizon, and the currents likely carried him further from established shipping lanes. It was mid-morning when Michael first noticed the distinctive dorsal fin cutting through the water approximately 50 yards away. Having spent his life on these waters, he immediately recognized it as belonging to an oceanic white-tip shark, one of the species most frequently implicated in attacks on shipwreck survivors. Unlike the more common reef sharks that typically avoided human contact, oceanic whitetips were known for their bold curiosity and opportunistic feeding behavior. Initially, the shark maintained its distance, making wide circles around Michael's position as if assessing the situation. Each passing hour brought the predator closer, its circuits gradually tightening. By early afternoon, it was approaching within 10 yards of the floating debris, its distinctive white-tipped fins visible as it glided beneath the surface. Michael knew enough about shark behavior to understand that sudden movements or splashing could trigger a predatory response. He remained as still as possible on his makeshift raft, only occasionally adjusting his position to prevent his limbs from dangling in the water. The psychological strain was immense, watching a predator's methodical approach while being completely exposed and vulnerable. As the afternoon wore on, the shark's behavior became increasingly bold. It made closer passes, sometimes swimming directly beneath Michael's floating debris. During one such pass, the shark brushed against the underside of the wooden planks, causing the entire structure to shift alarmingly. Michael struggled to maintain his position, inadvertently creating splashes that attracted the shark's immediate attention. What happened next occurred with terrifying speed. The oceanic whitetip, likely interpreting the disturbance as a sign of wounded prey, charged directly at Michael. Its powerful jaws clamped down on his left forearm as he instinctively raised it defensively. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, crushing pressure followed by the searing sensation of flesh being torn. Survival instinct took over. Driven by adrenaline and desperation, Michael struck back with the only weapon available, a splintered piece of wood from his makeshift raft. With his right hand, he drove the jagged end of the plank directly into the shark's sensitive gills. The effect was immediate. The shark recoiled, releasing its grip on his arm and retreating several yards. Blood poured from the deep lacerations on Michael's arm, spreading an alarming red slick across the water's surface. Using strips torn from his shirt, he fashioned a crude tourniquet, knowing that blood loss and the scent of blood in the water now presented dual threats to his survival. The shark remained nearby for several hours, occasionally approaching but seemingly more cautious after the counterattack. Michael remained vigilant through the night, fighting against exhaustion and blood loss while keeping pressure on his wound. By morning, his situation had grown dire. Dehydration, exposure, and injury had severely weakened him. The distant sound of an engine first registered in Michael's semi-conscious state. A local fishing vessel departed early from Pemba Harbor and spotted the unusual debris floating in their regular fishing grounds. As they approached, the crew immediately recognized a distressed man and initiated a rescue. The fishermen worked quickly to bring Michael aboard, shocked by his condition and the severity of his injury. One crew member, who had basic medical training, properly dressed the wound while another radioed for emergency assistance. As they sped back to shore, Michael slipped in and out of consciousness, the combination of blood loss, dehydration, and exhaustion taking their toll. At Pemba's regional hospital, doctors worked to save Michael's arm, which had sustained significant tissue damage and multiple deep lacerations. The attending physician later remarked that the clean nature of some of the cuts, characteristic of shark teeth, had made surgical repair more straightforward than expected. After several hours of surgery and multiple blood transfusions, Michael's condition stabilized. During his recovery, marine biologists interviewed Michael about the encounter. His detailed descriptions of the shark's size, coloration, and behavior provided valuable data for their ongoing studies of oceanic whitetip populations in the region. Researchers noted that warming ocean temperatures had pushed these typically deep-water predators closer to coastal areas in recent years. 6 months after the incident, Michael had regained approximately 70% of function in his injured arm. Though he no longer ventured out alone in his small boat, he continued working in the fishing industry, now as part of a crew on a larger vessel equipped with modern safety equipment and shark deterrent systems. His experience had transformed him into an advocate for maritime safety among the local fishing community, regularly sharing his story as a cautionary tale about proper preparation and respect for the ocean's most formidable predators. 2011. Carlos Vega had been night diving for nearly 15 years. The 38-year-old Nicaraguan fisherman preferred the quiet solitude of the nocturnal underwater world, away from the crowded daytime fishing spots where competition for the best catches was fierce. Over the years, he had developed a reputation among the local fishing community for his exceptional ability to navigate the dark waters and return with impressive hauls of snapper, grouper, and lobster. On this particular evening, Carlos convinced his younger cousin Marco to join him for a night dive approximately 2 miles offshore from the coastal village of San Juan del Sur. Marco was relatively inexperienced with night diving but eager to learn from his skilled relative. The conditions seemed ideal. Calm seas, a clear night sky, and a 3/4 moon providing ambient light on the water's surface. They anchored their small fishing boat over a reef system known locally as La Corona, a productive spot where Carlos had made good catches in previous weeks. After a final equipment check, ensuring their diving lights were functioning properly, spears were secure, and catch bags attached to their weight belts, the two men entered the water shortly after 10 p.m. The water was warm, approximately 79 degrees Fahrenheit, with visibility extending about 15 feet in the beam of their underwater lights. They descended to around 30 feet, where the reef structure created numerous crevices and overhangs, providing hiding places for their nocturnal prey. Carlos signaled for Marco to stay within visual range as they began their hunt, moving methodically along the contours of the reef. For the first 45 minutes, the dive proceeded exactly as planned. Carlos had already speared 2 substantial red snappers and a grouper, securing them to his catch bag. Marco had been less successful but was enjoying the experience, pointing excitedly at the variety of marine life their lights revealed. Moray eels extending from rocky crevices, lobsters scuttling across the sandy bottom, and the occasional ray gliding effortlessly over the reef. Neither diver noticed the bull shark's approach. Unlike many shark species that prefer open water, bull sharks are comfortable in shallow coastal environments and are known for their aggressive territorial behavior. This particular specimen, later estimated to be approximately 10 feet in length, had likely been attracted by the blood trail from Carlos's catches. Carlos had just positioned himself near a promising overhang, his diving light illuminating a large lobster, when a shadow passed through the periphery of his vision. Years of experience triggered an immediate sense of danger, but the shark charged from his right side before he could react. The initial strike was devastatingly powerful. The bull shark's jaws clamped onto Carlos's right thigh, the rows of serrated teeth easily penetrating his wetsuit and into the muscle beneath. The impact knocked his diving light from his grip, spinning through the water before resting on the sandy bottom. Its beam created eerie shadows across the reef. Pain exploded through Carlos's body, but his survival instinct immediately kicked in. He remembered the advice of an old fisherman who had survived a similar encounter years before. Fight back, hard and direct. Using his spear, he jabbed forcefully at the shark's sensitive gills, applying as much pressure as he could muster despite the excruciating pain radiating from his leg. The shark momentarily released its grip, circling back with the methodical determination of bull sharks. Carlos could see the animal now in the beam of his fallen diving light. Its substantial girth, the distinctive short, blunt snout that gave the species its name, and the cold, assessing eyes that seemed to calculate its next move. Exploring about 20 feet away, Marco turned at the commotion and instantly recognized the dire situation. Despite his inexperience and the surge of fear that washed over him, he swam rapidly toward his cousin, his diving light illuminating the surreal underwater confrontation. Before Marco could reach him, the shark attacked again. This time it targeted Carlos's midsection, powerful jaws clamping onto his side just below the ribs. The force of the bite nearly knocked the regulator from Carlos's mouth, and he felt a sickening sensation as teeth penetrated his wetsuit and tore into his flesh. Fighting through the pain and rising panic, Carlos jabbed his spear directly into the shark's eye with all his remaining strength. The shark released its grip, shaking its massive head in what appeared to be discomfort before beginning to circle again, now at a slightly greater distance but not abandoning its attack. By this time, Marco had reached Carlos. Seeing the blood clouding the water around his cousin, he recognized they had only moments before the shark would be drawn back for another potentially fatal attack. He grabbed Carlos under the arms and began a rapid ascent toward the surface, careful not to rise too quickly despite the emergency. The bull shark made one final approach as they neared the surface, but Marco kicked powerfully with his fins, creating enough disturbance in the water to deter the predator momentarily. They broke the surface approximately 30 yards from their anchored boat, Carlos now barely conscious from blood loss and shock. Marco's shouts alerted Ramon, a fellow fisherman crewing the boat during their dive. He immediately started the engine and maneuvered toward the struggling divers, reaching over the side to help haul Carlos aboard. The effort was complicated by the need to remove Carlos's tank and weight belt while keeping pressure on his most severe wounds. Once aboard, Ramon quickly assessed the situation. Carlos had sustained major lacerations to his right thigh, with muscle tissue visible through the torn wetsuit. The bite to his torso, while less deep, had left a semicircular pattern of puncture wounds that were bleeding steadily. Using the boat's first aid kit, Ramon applied pressure bandages to the leg wound, while Marco steered the vessel toward shore at maximum speed. The journey to the coastal clinic took 23 agonizing minutes. Carlos drifted in and out of consciousness, his skin growing increasingly pale as shock set in despite his companion's efforts to keep him warm and maintain pressure on his wounds. They radioed ahead and medical staff were waiting at the small dock when they arrived. Dr. Elena Morales, the night physician in a medical clinic, immediately recognized the severity of Carlos's condition. The facility wasn't equipped for major trauma. Still, she and her team worked quickly to stabilize him, starting IV fluids and administering antibiotics, a critical step given the high risk of infection from shark bites, which often introduced bacteria from the animal's mouth directly into the wounds. After initial stabilization, Carlos was transferred by ambulance to the regional hospital in Rivas, where surgical teams worked for over 6 hours to repair the damage to his leg, which included severed muscle tissue and a partially damaged femoral artery. The wounds to his torso, while dramatic in appearance, had fortunately missed vital organs. Recovery was a long and difficult process. Carlos required multiple surgeries to repair the damaged muscle tissue in his thigh, followed by months of physical therapy to regain mobility. The psychological impact proved equally challenging. Nightmares and anxiety about returning to the water plagued him throughout his recovery. The experience transformed Carlos into an advocate for shark safety education within his fishing community. He frequently spoke to younger fishermen about proper precautions, emphasizing the importance of avoiding night dives in areas that harbor bull sharks and never keeping caught fish attached to one's body while in the water. Douglas, Queensland, Australia, 2018. Port Douglas, nestled along the northeastern coast of Queensland, is better known for coral reefs than close encounters with predators. It sits at the edge of the Great Barrier Reef, a magnet for divers, snorkelers, and adventure seekers. Calm bays and mangrove-lined estuaries stretch for miles. Tourists often explore the area by kayak, especially in the early morning when the water is glassy and marine life is most active. Though shark sightings aren't uncommon this far north, attacks remain incredibly rare, especially from the fast and elusive mako shark. That made what happened to Rachel Brooks in May 2018 all the more alarming. Rachel, a 42-year-old physical therapist from Adelaide, had flown to Port Douglas for a solo getaway. She had booked a coastal cabin and packed light, just a few changes of clothes, a well-worn fishing rod, and her sleek blue kayak that she had custom-painted with native patterns years earlier. Her plan was simple: paddle, relax, and fish. A few days into her trip, she launched her kayak just before 6 a.m. from 4 Mile Beach. The tide was low and the wind calm. She paddled steadily northeast toward a shallow reef shelf she'd read about in a local guidebook. She was about 800 meters offshore when it happened. The water was unusually clear that morning. Schools of small fish darted beneath her, and the sun hadn't yet heated the sea surface. Rachel had just stopped paddling and was casting a light line off the side of her kayak when a sudden splash behind her snapped her out of her routine. She turned quickly but saw nothing, just the ripples. Then came the impact. A violent jolt slammed the right side of her kayak. The fiberglass hull cracked with the force, nearly throwing her off balance. Something had struck her from beneath. Before she could react, a large, torpedo-shaped shark burst halfway out of the water and latched onto the side of the kayak with rows of jagged teeth. The unmistakable blue-gray sheen and the long, pointed snout left no doubt it was a mako. Rachel later told reporters she hadn't even had time to scream. Her hands moved on instinct. She grabbed her paddle and struck the shark's head as hard as possible. It barely flinched. The shark thrashed, twisting the kayak and slapping the water with its powerful tail. One of its teeth grazed her left hand, leaving a gash between the thumb and index finger. She struck again, this time right at the shark's snout. That got its attention. The predator released its grip, dropping back into the water with a splash and a swirl. It circled once beneath her, then vanished. Rachel sat frozen, her breathing ragged. She didn't know whether to paddle or sit still. The ocean had gone quiet again, too quiet. But the shark didn't return. Keeping her bleeding hand elevated, she paddled slowly back toward the beach, stopping to look behind her every few strokes. The fractured hull was causing her kayak to take on water, and she had to lean to one side to keep balance. It took nearly 25 minutes, but she finally reached the shallows. Locals on the beach spotted her damaged boat and helped her out of the water. Rachel's injuries were mostly minor. A few stitches for the hand wound, some bruises on her legs from the impact, and a small scrape on her ribcage from the kayak's jagged edge. The psychological implications hit harder. She stayed in Port Douglas for the rest of the week but didn't go back into the ocean. Her kayak was left behind, cracked in 2 spots and scarred with bite marks. Marine biologists later examined photos of the bite radius and confirmed it was almost certainly a short-fin mako, likely over 8 feet long. They theorized the shark had mistaken her kayak for prey, possibly a seal or tuna, due to its size and movement. While makos are known for their speed and hunting ability, attacks on humans are extremely rare, especially on kayaks. Rachel returned to Adelaide with a new story, and a permanent scar on her hand. Friends joked that she'd survived Australia's fastest shark, but the humor wore thin for her. She began attending weekly counseling for ocean-related anxiety. Despite that, she didn't sell her replacement kayak. As she told a local newspaper 6 months later, she didn't want fear to make her quit something she loved. She hadn't gone paddling again yet, but she said she planned to, eventually, just not in Port Douglas. Remote archipelago of the Azores, where the Atlantic's deep blue waters conceal submarine volcanoes and diverse marine ecosystems. 29-year-old Portuguese spearfisher Tiago Demetrio Nascimento ventured into the depths off São Miguel Island in the summer of 2019. The Azores, an autonomous region of Portugal located about 1,400 kilometers west of the mainland, had long been renowned among spearfishing enthusiasts for its crystal-clear waters and abundant marine life, including large pelagic species that drew adventurous souls from across Europe. This area off the island's southern coast has been a traditional fishing ground for centuries, when local fishermen in small wooden boats would brave the unpredictable Atlantic to feed their families. The archipelago's volcanic origin created underwater landscapes of dramatic drops and shelves, where cold and warm currents converged to create biological hotspots rich with tuna, marlin, and mako sharks. Nascimento, a marine biology researcher at a university in Lisbon with 5 years of competitive spearfishing experience, had traveled to São Miguel specifically to study and hunt Atlantic bluefin tuna. His research focused on sustainable fishing practices, and he hoped to gather data on tuna populations while pursuing his passion. Accompanying him that fateful day was his research colleague and diving partner, Xavier Fernandes Oliveira, who had grown up in the Azores and knew these waters intimately. The morning had begun with promising conditions: calm seas, excellent visibility, and reports from local fishermen of tuna schools passing through the area. Nascimento and Oliveira had chartered a small boat captained by local fisherman Manuel Sousa, departing from Ponta Delgada harbor before dawn. By mid-morning, they had reached their chosen diving spot, approximately 3 kilometers offshore, where the seabed dropped dramatically from 30 to over 200 meters. After preparing their equipment and reviewing their safety protocols, Nascimento dove first, descending to approximately 25 meters, where he spotted a school of medium-sized tuna. He aimed his spear gun and struck one of the fish with practiced precision. The successful hit triggered a cascade of events, transforming a routine dive into a fight for survival. The wounded tuna, approximately 30 kilograms in weight, began thrashing violently, releasing a trail of blood into the water as Nascimento started his ascent. After diving about 15 meters away, Oliveira later reported seeing the water column between them suddenly darken as something moved incredibly toward his colleague. Neither man noticed a large mako shark, estimated later to be 3.5 meters in length, patrolling the deeper waters below. Makos, the fastest sharks in the ocean, capable of bursts up to 74 kilometers per hour, are typically offshore predators rarely encountered by humans. This particular specimen, likely attracted by the low-frequency vibrations of the struggling tuna and the subsequent blood trail, rocketed upward with explosive acceleration. The shark struck Nascimento from below, its teeth sinking into his right thigh with devastating force. The impact spun him violently in the water, disorienting him momentarily. According to Oliveira's account to the Portuguese Maritime Authority, the shark's initial bite lasted only seconds before it released and circled back. In that critical moment, Oliveira fired his spear adjacent to the shark, creating enough disturbance to divert its attention momentarily. Nascimento, bleeding profusely but still conscious, managed to inflate his emergency surface marker buoy. The bright orange marker shot to the surface, signaling distress to their boat captain. Meanwhile, Oliveira reached his injured colleague, wrapped a makeshift tourniquet from his weight belt around Nascimento's leg, and began a controlled emergency ascent. The next 12 minutes became a desperate race against blood loss and the threat of a secondary attack. Nascimento, growing weaker by the minute, later recalled focusing intensely on his breathing techniques to maintain consciousness. He repeatedly reminded himself about his pregnant wife waiting at home in Lisbon, using the thought to fight against the encroaching shock. Captain Sousa, spotting the emergency buoy, immediately radioed for help and maneuvered the boat to the diver's position. By remarkable coincidence, a fishing trawler captained by elderly local fisherman Antonio Medeiros was passing nearby and responded to the distress call. The larger vessel had better medical supplies and more crew to assist with the rescue. When Oliveira and Nascimento reached the surface, they found both boats waiting. The crew of Medeiros' trawler quickly hauled them aboard, where an off-duty nurse who happened to be the captain's daughter-in-law, Luisa Medeiros, applied proper tourniquets and pressure bandages to control the bleeding. The shark's bite had narrowly missed Nascimento's femoral artery, a fact that medical professionals would later credit for saving his life. A Portuguese Air Force helicopter dispatched from the nearby military base at Lajes Field arrived within 40 minutes to evacuate Nascimento to a hospital in Ponta Delgada. The spearfisher underwent 7 hours of surgery to repair extensive muscle damage, torn blood vessels and compound fractures to his femur. The medical team, led by orthopedic surgeon Dr. Carla Mendonça, later stated that the clean nature of the bite wound, characteristic of mako sharks, had made reconstruction more successful than it might have been with a more ragged injury. Nascimento's recovery spanned 8 months of intensive physical therapy. His research institute supported him throughout, adjusting his doctoral program to incorporate his personal experience into a study on predator behavior triggered by spearfishing activities. Against considerable odds, he regained nearly complete mobility in his leg, though prominent scars remained as permanent reminders of his encounter. The incident prompted local maritime authorities to implement new protocols for spearfishing operations around the Azores, including mandatory buddy systems and the requirement to carry shark deterrent devices. Nascimento advocated for sustainable spearfishing practices that minimized blood released into the water, developing specialized equipment that prevents bleeding from caught fish. His experience transformed him from merely a researcher into a living case study on human-shark interactions and survival against overwhelming odds. Along the rugged coastline of Humboldt County, California, where ancient redwood forests meet the churning Pacific Ocean, 41-year-old marine photographer Amanda Winslow Bell experienced a harrowing encounter with nature's perfect predator on September 23, 2022. Trinidad Bay, a horseshoe-shaped harbor approximately 25 miles north of Eureka, had long been a launch point for Bell's solo kayaking expeditions to photograph migrating gray whales and sea lions. This stretch of the Pacific Northwest coastline, characterized by its cold waters and abundant marine life, had a documented history of great white shark activity dating back to the 1950s. The region's numerous seal and sea lion colonies provided natural hunting grounds for these apex predators, though attacks on humans remained exceedingly rare. Local kayakers considered shark encounters an acknowledged but statistically remote risk, typically exchanging information about recent sightings before venturing out. Originally from Seattle but residing in Arcata for the past decade, Belle established herself as a respected wildlife photographer specializing in marine ecosystems. That Friday morning, she launched her distinctive yellow sea kayak from Trinidad State Beach with plans to document a recently spotted pod of humpback whales reported feeding offshore. According to weather records, morning conditions were typical for early autumn. A light offshore breeze, moderate swell of 3 to 4 feet, and temperatures around 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Belle wore a 5mm neoprene wetsuit, standard safety equipment, and carried 2 waterproof cameras in sealed containers. Her expedition route, filed with the local harbor master Santiago Mendez, indicated she planned to paddle approximately 3 miles offshore toward a known whale feeding area near Trinidad Head. 2 hours into her journey, Belle had positioned herself about 2.7 miles from shore in waters approximately 140 feet deep. Her GoPro footage, later recovered, showed she had successfully photographed a pair of humpbacks before they moved northward. The incident occurred as she prepared to follow the whales at approximately 10:47 a.m. Without warning, Belle's kayak suddenly lifted from below with tremendous force. The vessel tilted nearly vertically before completely capsizing, throwing her into the 55 degrees Fahrenheit water. As she surfaced, gasping from the cold shock, she found herself face to face with a great white shark, later estimated to be 15 to 16 feet in length. The predator had bitten into the stern of her kayak, puncturing the rotomolded plastic hull and creating a distinctive crescent-shaped impression matching the shark's upper jaw. In her subsequent report to the authorities, Belle described experiencing an unusual clarity of thought, rather than panic. Drawing on her knowledge of shark behavior from years of marine photography work, she remained as motionless as possible while maintaining visual contact with the predator. The great white circled her position, occasionally submerging before reappearing from different directions. During one pass, the shark brushed against her legs with its rough skin, tearing her wetsuit but not breaking the skin. Belle later credited her survival to 3 critical actions. First, she activated her emergency position indicator, EPIRB, indicating the radio beacon, and sent an automated distress signal with her GPS coordinates to Coast Guard authorities. Second, she inflated her high-visibility emergency flotation device, increasing her surface profile to appear less like typical prey. Finally, she maintained a horizontal position on the surface, avoiding vertical kicking movements that might mimic injured seal behavior. Belle remained in this perilous standoff with the Great White for 11 minutes. Her damaged kayak floated nearby, taking on water but providing some distraction for the shark, which bumped the vessel several times. Then, as unexpectedly as it had appeared, the shark descended into deeper water and did not return. Belle would later hypothesize that the shark had initially mistaken her yellow kayak for a sea lion from below, but lost interest upon discovering it was inedible. Approximately 23 minutes after activating her EPIRB, Belle spotted the commercial fishing vessel Northern Light approaching her position. Captain Everett Thorne and his 3 crew had received the Coast Guard relay of her distress signal while pulling crab pots nearby. They located Belle using her emergency strobe light and recovered her and the damaged kayak. Aboard the Northern Light, Belle was treated for mild hypothermia and superficial lacerations to her lower legs from contact with the shark's dermal denticles. Captain Thorne radioed ahead to Trinidad Harbor, where an ambulance waited to transport Belle to Mad River Community Hospital in Arcata. Medical records show she was treated and released the same day with no serious injuries beyond mild hypothermia and shock. The damaged kayak provided valuable scientific data. Marine biologist Dr. Sophia Wintersmith examined the bite marks and recovered 2 shark teeth embedded in the hull. DNA analysis confirmed the attacker as Carcharodon carcharias, a mature female great white. The bite radius suggested a shark in the upper size range for the species along the California coast. Belle's recovered GoPro had continued recording throughout the incident, capturing extraordinary footage of the great white circling her in the water. Later analyzed by shark researchers, this video provided rare documentation of investigatory behavior rather than predatory attacking. The footage became an invaluable educational tool for understanding shark-human interactions and was featured in a 2023 scientific paper on great white hunting patterns. In the months following her near-fatal encounter, Belle collaborated with marine safety experts to develop enhanced protocols for solo kayakers in known shark territories. She advocated mandatory EPIRB devices, shark deterrent accessories, and improved communication systems for isolated water sports enthusiasts. The Belle Protocol, as it became known among Pacific Northwest kayakers, emphasized preparation over fear and education over avoidance. Rather than abandoning her work, Belle resumed ocean kayaking 4 months later, albeit with a redesigned vessel featuring a reinforced hull and integrated shark deterrent technology. Her first expedition back on the water was accompanied by a support boat and fellow photographers, documenting her return to the site of her encounter. In public presentations about her experience, Bell consistently emphasized the statistical rarity of shark attacks and the importance of understanding marine predators in their natural context. She established a non-profit organization dedicated to ocean conservation education and responsible marine wildlife photography techniques. Her book, Surface Tension: Surviving the Great White, published in late 2023, became a bestseller not for its sensationalism, but for its balanced perspective on coexisting with the ocean's apex predators. On the eastern shore of Grand Bahama Island, where turquoise waters lap against pristine white sand beaches, the Sapphire Cove Resort and Marina has stood as a monument to tropical luxury since its construction in 2018. The sprawling 35-acre property featured a central attraction that distinguished it from competing destinations: a natural saltwater lagoon connected to the ocean through a narrow channel, designed to offer guests an authentic marine experience within the safety of resort boundaries. The lagoon, approximately 3 acres in size and reaching depths of 12 feet in its center, had quickly become famous throughout the Caribbean tourism industry for its population of docile lemon sharks. These yellow-tinted predators, typically growing to lengths of 8 to 10 feet, were not naturally aggressive toward humans and had become accustomed to the presence of tourists. An unofficial practice had emerged among guests and some staff members of tossing bits of food into the water, creating a problematic association between humans and feeding opportunities. On July 12, 2023, the Novak family from Minneapolis, parents Theodore and Valentina and their 9-year-old daughter Amelia Zara Novak, was 3 days into their week-long Bahamian vacation. The family had selected Sapphire Cove specifically for its child-friendly amenities and the opportunity to observe marine life in a controlled environment. According to subsequent statements, they had attended the resort's marine biology presentation on their first day, but had missed the portion covering lagoon safety protocols. Resort security footage, later reviewed by the police force detective Winston Adderley, showed the family enjoying breakfast on their suite balcony overlooking the lagoon at approximately 9:45 a.m. At 10:12 a.m., Theodore and Valentina conversed with another guest who had approached their table, momentarily directing their attention away from their daughter. During this brief distraction window, Amelia left the table and descended the stairs to the lagoon's edge, apparently fascinated by the shadows of fish visible in the clear water. The lagoon area was staffed by 2 lifeguards, Darnell McKinney and Jasmine Roll, positioned at opposite ends of the rectangular body of water. McKinney was attending to a family requesting snorkeling equipment. At the same time, Roll was momentarily distracted by a group of teenagers engaging in prohibited diving from the lagoon's wooden pier, and neither noticed the small girl approaching the water alone. According to witness Camden Thornhill, a marine biology student interning at the resort, Amelia had observed other guests tossing bread into the water earlier that morning. Following their example, she carried a croissant from breakfast to the water's edge, breaking off small pieces and throwing them into the shallows. This activity quickly attracted several fish and, crucially, 3 lemon sharks, estimated at 7 to 8 feet in length, resting in deeper water. Security footage showed Amelia becoming increasingly excited as the sharks approached, stepping deeper into the lagoon until she was knee-deep in water. At approximately 10:17 a.m., she began splashing enthusiastically, which triggered a predatory response from one of the sharks. Marine biologist Dr. Lucinda Haversham, who later analyzed the footage, noted that the combination of food stimuli, unfamiliar splashing patterns, and the child's small size likely confused the shark's sensory systems. The attack occurred with startling swiftness. One shark, later identified as a mature female approximately 8.5 feet long, suddenly darted forward and bit Amelia's right forearm. Witnesses reported hearing the child scream instantly, carrying across the otherwise peaceful morning ambiance and alerting parents and staff to the emergency. Lifeguard Jasmine Roll responded with remarkable speed, covering approximately 45 yards in seconds to reach the child. Without hesitation, she entered the water and lifted Amelia away from the shark, which immediately released its grip and retreated to deeper water. As Rolla carried the injured child to shore, lifeguard McKinney was already radioing for emergency medical assistance and retrieving the resort's trauma kit. Theodore and Valentina Novak reached their daughter within moments of her being brought ashore. Theodore, who had basic emergency medical training from his work as a commercial airline pilot, assisted McKinney in applying pressure to the wound, while Valentina comforted their terrified daughter. Resort physician Dr. Eloise Burrows arrived within 3 minutes and immediately applied a proper tourniquet to control bleeding from the severely lacerated forearm. The resort's emergency response system was activated efficiently, and a helicopter ambulance arrived from a hospital in Freeport within 22 minutes. Amelia was airlifted with her mother while Theodore followed in a resort vehicle. Medical records from the hospital indicate the child arrived in stable condition, despite significant blood loss. Emergency surgeon Dr. Xavier Thompson performed a 4-hour procedure to repair damaged blood vessels, muscle tissue, and tendons in her forearm. Remarkably, the shark's bite had missed major arteries, and the clean nature of the wound, characteristic of lemon shark dentition, which is designed for holding rather than tearing, allowed for more effective surgical repair. According to Dr. Thompson's surgical notes, the precision of the injury suggested a brief exploratory bite rather than a feeding attempt, consistent with cases of mistaken identity in shark encounters. Following the incident, Sapphire Cove Resort Management implemented immediate policy changes. General Manager Victoria Halstead ordered the lagoon closed pending a comprehensive safety review. Within 48 hours, the resort installed physical barriers preventing direct guest access to the water, prominently posted explicit warning signs in multiple languages, doubled lifeguard staffing, and implemented strict enforcement of the previously existing but poorly enforced no-feeding policy. The Novak family remained in the Bahamas for another 2 weeks, as Amelia underwent initial recovery and follow-up care. The resort covered all medical expenses and accommodations during this period. Psychological counselor Dr. Marcus DeVoe provided daily therapy sessions to help Amelia process the traumatic experience, noting in his reports that while initially experiencing nightmares and anxiety, she showed remarkable resilience. 6 months after the incident, with ongoing physical therapy in Minnesota, Amelia regained approximately 85% functionality in her arm. The emotional impact proved more complex to resolve. According to family updates shared with resort management, Amelia initially developed significant anxiety around water, refusing even bathtubs for several weeks. Through consistent therapy and gradual exposure techniques, she eventually progressed to wading in shallow pool waters while holding her father's hand. The incident prompted a broader examination of artificial lagoon attractions throughout Caribbean resorts. The Bahamas Authority in Tourism implemented new regulatory standards requiring strict separation between guests and potentially dangerous marine life. Marine conservation organizations used the case to highlight the ecological and safety problems created by feeding wild animals, which disrupts natural behavior patterns and creates dangerous associations. After consulting with attorneys, Theodore and Valentina Novak declined to pursue legal action against the resort, acknowledging their role in failing to supervise their daughter adequately. Instead, they worked with Sapphire Cove to develop an educational program for arriving families about marine safety and responsible wildlife interaction. Tourism officials praised their cooperation as a constructive response to an unfortunate incident. In a surprising development, 8 months after the incident, Amelia expressed interest in marine biology, seemingly transformed by her experience rather than permanently traumatized by it. With her parents' cautious support, she began volunteering at the Minnesota Aquarium's Shark Education Program, sharing her knowledge with other children to promote respect rather than fear of these essential marine predators. On the morning of April 19, 2025, the waters off the coast of San Clemente Island, California, appeared deceptively calm. San Clemente Island had long served as a vital training ground for the United States Navy, its sheltered bays and challenging topography providing ideal conditions for amphibious operations and naval exercises since the early 1930s. The island's remote location, approximately 70 miles west of San Diego, allowed for extensive military activities while minimizing civilian interference. Lieutenant Commander Joaquin Ramirez Vasquez led a crew of 7 sailors aboard the rigid-hulled inflatable boat, or RHIB, designated Swift 6, as part of the Naval Special Warfare Advanced Water Navigation Training Program. At 36, Ramirez Vasquez had served for 14 years, earning commendations for his leadership during several Middle Eastern deployments. This morning's exercise focused on coastal infiltration techniques, relatively routine for the experienced crew. The Pacific waters around San Clemente were known for their biodiversity, including a healthy population of marine predators. Navy personnel frequently spotted blue sharks and the occasional hammerhead during operations, but sightings rarely disrupted training. The crew's mission that morning involved navigating through a series of underwater obstacles while maintaining stealth protocols. Petty Officer Second Class Tenzin Wangchuk monitored sonar readings from the boat's stern, while Seaman Apprentice Lakshmi Krishnamurthy managed communications with the support vessel positioned 2 miles offshore. At 9:37, as Swift 6 entered a narrow channel between 2 underwater rock formations, Ensign DeAndre Jackson noticed an unusual shadow moving beneath their vessel. Initially, he dismissed it as one of the large sunfish common to the area. The rigid-hulled inflatable boat continued on course at reduced speed, the engine's hum barely audible above the gentle slapping of waves against the hull. What happened next occurred with such violence and speed that later accounts from crew members contained slight variations. The massive great white shark, later estimated to be approximately 18 feet long, appeared to rise from the depths with deliberate purpose. Marine biologists would later suggest the shark likely mistook the boat's silhouette and engine vibrations for those of a distressed seal, prime prey for these apex predators. The shark breached partially, its enormous head clearing the water's surface as its jaws clamped down on the rigid-hulled inflatable boat's starboard pontoon. The impact sent shockwaves through the vessel, throwing Seaman Krishnamurthy and Petty Officer 3rd Class Malcolm Okafor into the water. The boat tilted dangerously as seawater flooded the punctured section. Lieutenant Commander Ramirez Vasquez immediately radioed a distress call, while Petty Officer 1st Class Zara Al-Farsi deployed a rescue line toward the sailors thrashing in the water. Okafor managed to grasp the line quickly, but Krishnamurthy had been thrown further from the boat. The shark, after its initial attack on the vessel, circled back with alarming speed. According to Wang Chuk's account, the predator's dorsal fin cut through the water directly toward Krishnamurthy, who attempted to swim back toward the damaged, rigid-hulled inflatable boat. Despite Ensign Jackson's efforts to distract the shark by pounding on the boat's hull, a technique sometimes used to deter curious sharks, the Great White continued its approach. Krishnamurthy later reported feeling something massive brush against her leg seconds before the shark's jaws closed around her right calf. The force pulled her underwater momentarily before the shark released its grip, perhaps confused by the taste of neoprene from her wetsuit rather than the blubber it expected. Ensign Jackson, displaying remarkable courage, dove into the water and helped drag the severely injured Krishnamurthy back toward the boat. By this time, Petty Officer Al-Farsi had deployed the boat's emergency shark repellent, a concentrated chemical irritant designed to temporarily drive away aggressive marine predators. The United States ship Coronado, a littoral combat ship conducting exercises nearby, responded to Ramirez Vasquez's Mayday call. Within 12 minutes, a high-speed rescue craft reached Swift 6's position. Medical corpsman Estefania Rodriguez-Cho immediately applied a tourniquet to Krishnamurthy's leg, while the remaining crew was transferred to the rescue vessel. The shark continued to circle the damaged, rigid-hulled inflatable boat for several minutes after all personnel had been evacuated, occasionally bumping against the pontoons before finally losing interest and disappearing into deeper water. Navy photographers aboard the rescue vessel captured several images of the predator, which marine biologists from the Scripps Institution of Oceanography later identified as a mature female great white, likely over 30 years old based on its size and distinctive scarring patterns. Seaman Krishnamurthy was airlifted to a hospital in San Diego, where surgeons worked for 7 hours to repair extensive damage to her calf muscle and tibial artery. While the injury ended her hopes for special operations training, she recovered enough to continue her naval career in a technical capacity. The incident prompted a 3-week suspension of waterborne training exercises around San Clemente Island, while Naval Special Warfare Command reviewed safety protocols. The review led to the implementation of enhanced electronic shark deterrent systems on all training vessels and mandatory aerial reconnaissance of training areas before water insertion exercises. Marine conservation experts noted that the incident represented extremely unusual behavior for a great white shark. Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka from the California Marine Mammal Center suggested that the unusual warm water temperatures that spring, combined with changes in local seal population movements, might have altered typical shark hunting patterns. He emphasized that such unprovoked attacks on vessels remained exceedingly rare. Lieutenant Commander Ramirez Vasquez received a Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal for his leadership during the crisis, while Ensign Jackson was awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for his rescue of Seaman Krishnamurthy. The damaged, rigid-hulled inflatable boat was later transported to the Naval Surface Warfare Center in Carderock, Maryland, where researchers analyzed the bite patterns and force exerted by the shark, data that proved valuable for improving future naval craft designs. The incident, while traumatic for those involved, ultimately strengthened the Navy's understanding of operating in environments shared with potentially dangerous marine wildlife. For Seaman Krishnamurthy, who later shared her experience during naval safety briefings, the encounter provided a powerful reminder of nature's unpredictability and the importance of preparation even in seemingly routine operations. The summer of 2018 brought unusually warm currents to South Africa's Eastern Cape Province, with water temperatures along Port Elizabeth's beaches reaching their highest point in 3 decades. Kings Beach, a popular swimming destination with its wide sandy shore and typically gentle waves, served as a recreational hub for both locals and tourists since the colonial era. The area had a complex history with shark encounters. The nearby Algoa Bay was known for its diverse marine life, including a significant population of great white sharks attracted by the robust seal colonies on the offshore islands. 28-year-old Saifo Dlamini had worked as a senior lifeguard at Kings Beach for 7 years, earning widespread respect for his swimming prowess and unwavering dedication to water safety. Born in the coastal township of New Brighton, Saifo had learned to swim in the dangerous currents of the Indian Ocean, developing skills that later earned him national recognition in competitive swimming. After narrowly missing qualification for the 2016 Olympic team, he had dedicated himself fully to his lifeguarding career, personally saving over 40 swimmers from dangerous rip currents during his tenure. On February 12th, crowds packed Kings Beach as temperatures soared past 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Municipal authorities had installed additional shark spotting towers the previous year, with trained observers scanning the waters continually during peak hours. The morning had passed uneventfully, with Saifo's team performing 2 routine rescues of swimmers caught in mild currents. At approximately 2:15 p.m., 15-year-old Amale Nkosi, visiting from Johannesburg with her family, ventured beyond the designated swimming area. An experienced pool swimmer, Amale had little understanding of ocean dynamics and quickly found herself caught in a powerful rip current that pulled her more than 100 meters offshore within minutes. Her initial calls for help went unnoticed amid the general beach noise. Thulani Mbata, a junior lifeguard stationed at the Eastern Tower, finally spotted Amale's increasingly frantic struggles. He immediately alerted Saifo via radio, reporting a swimmer in distress beyond the safe zone. Without hesitation, Saifo grabbed his rescue buoy and sprinted toward the water's edge. Witnesses later commented on his remarkable focus and calm demeanor as he dove into the surf. Saifo reached Amale within 90 seconds, his powerful freestyle stroke cutting through the choppy water with practiced efficiency. The terrified teenager was approaching exhaustion, having fought the current for several minutes. Saifo immediately instructed her to grab the rescue buoy while he assessed the safest route back to shore, aware that the same current that had dragged her outward could be used to navigate laterally before attempting a return. What neither Saifo nor the shore observers could know was that a 4.8-meter great white shark had entered the bay that morning, attracted by unusual bait fish movements caused by the warming water. Marine biologists would later determine that the shark was a young adult male, possibly disoriented by changing ocean temperatures that had disrupted normal migration patterns. As Saifo began towing Amale parallel to the shore, preparing to exit the rip current, the shark approached from deeper water. Backup lifeguard Zandile Mkhize had already entered the water with additional support equipment when she spotted a dark shadow moving beneath her colleagues. Her frantic whistle signals came too late. The great white struck with explosive force, surfacing directly beneath Saifo and clamping its massive jaws around his torso. The initial impact separated him from Amale, who was thrown several meters by the violent water displacement. Witnesses on shore described a brief, horrifying moment when Saifo was lifted partially above the water's surface before being pulled under, the water around him instantly turning crimson. Zandile, displaying extraordinary courage, continued toward Amale, reaching the girl moments later. 2 additional lifeguards, Blessing Mokoena and Vuyisile Ndlovu, launched the rescue jet ski, reaching Zandile and Amale within minutes, and retrieving them as the shark circled back toward the blood trail. Despite an immediate emergency response, including a helicopter search launched from nearby Humewood, Saifo's body was never recovered. Marine experts suggested that the shark had likely carried him into deeper water immediately after the initial attack, a common behavior pattern when great whites make prey captures. Amale Nkosi was transported to Livingstone Hospital, where she was treated for shock and minor abrasions. In subsequent interviews, she repeatedly expressed overwhelming guilt about Saifo's fate. Though psychologists working with the family helped her understand that responsibility lay not with her, but with the unpredictable forces of nature. The attack prompted authorities to close all Port Elizabeth beaches for 3 weeks, while conducting intensive aerial and boat-based shark spotting operations. Marine biologists from the nearby Bayworld Oceanarium, led by Dr. Nosifo Nkobo, installed additional acoustic tracking devices to monitor shark movements in the bay. The local community's response to the tragedy was immediate and profound. Within days, a memorial fund established in Saifo's name raised over 500,000 rand to support his aging parents and younger siblings. The Port Elizabeth Municipal Council unanimously voted to rename the central lifeguard tower at King's Beach as Saifo Dlamini Tower, with a bronze plaque commemorating his sacrifice. Saifo's former coach, Mandla Zaba, spoke at the memorial service held on the beach 1 week after the attack. He told the assembled crowd of nearly 2,000 mourners that Saifo had always acknowledged the risks of his profession, but believed that saving lives was worth any personal danger. Among the mourners stood Amali and her family, who had postponed their return to Johannesburg to attend the service. The following summer, Kings Beach implemented what became known as the Dlamini Protocol, enhanced safety measures including drone surveillance, additional spotters, and improved communication systems between lifeguard stations. The protocol was subsequently adopted by beaches throughout South Africa's eastern coast. 5 years after the tragic event, Amale Nkosi returned to Port Elizabeth to join the junior lifeguard program, inspired by the man who had given his life for hers. In her application essay, she wrote that honoring Saifo's memory meant ensuring that his sacrifice continued to save lives through improved water safety practices. For the community of Port Elizabeth, Saifo Dlamini became more than a local hero. He embodied the selfless dedication of those who watch over the waters where humans and nature's most perfectly evolved predators occasionally and tragically intersect. The rugged coastline of New Zealand's North Island had long attracted adventure seekers drawn to its spectacular underwater topography and abundant marine life. In December 2021, the small fishing community of Mangonui in Doubtless Bay was experiencing its busiest tourist season in years, as domestic travelers sought outdoor experiences following the country's reopening after the coronavirus disease restrictions. The area's history of commercial fishing dated back to European settlement in the 1800s, but in recent decades, it gained popularity among recreational spearfishers targeting kingfish and snapper in its clear, cool waters. 33-year-old Ethan Cole had established himself as one of New Zealand's most accomplished spearfishers, having represented the country in international competitions across the Pacific. A former Navy diver with exceptional breath-holding capacity, Ethan had recently opened a spearfishing school in Auckland, teaching both technique and conservation ethics to enthusiastic students. His December expedition to Doubtless Bay was meant to scout locations for an advanced course he planned to offer the following autumn. On the morning of December 8th, Ethan and his diving partner, Wairamu Tainui, launched their 5.8-meter boat from Mangonui Harbor, heading toward a series of rocky pinnacles approximately 4 kilometers offshore. The location was known locally as the Needles, due to its sharp underwater formations that created complex currents attractive to baitfish and, consequently, larger predatory species. Weather conditions that day were ideal: light offshore winds, minimal swell, and water visibility extending beyond 20 meters. Ethan and Wairamu spent the morning making several productive dives, spearing 3 substantial snapper and a kingfish. Around midday, they moved to a deeper area where local fishermen had reported schools of trevally gathering around a submerged shelf that dropped from 15 to 40 meters. The abundance of fish in the area had reportedly attracted several shark species in recent weeks, though primarily smaller species considered non-threatening to humans. At approximately 1:30 p.m., after a brief rest period to rehydrate and check their equipment, Ethan entered the water for another dive. He carried his custom carbon fiber spear gun loaded with a 120-centimeter shaft and a catch bag attached to a float line. Wairamu remained on the boat, monitoring surface conditions and maintaining watch as standard safety protocol. Ethan's descent was textbook, a controlled head-down freedive that brought him to the edge of the underwater shelf within 40 seconds. At that depth, he spotted a substantial school of snapper hovering near the drop-off, perfect targets for his specialized three-pronged spear tip. His first shot successfully pierced a 4-kilogram snapper, which he quickly secured to his catch line. The thrashing of the wounded fish sent vibrations through the water column, vibrations that marine biologists would later note can travel significant distances in ocean environments. Unknown to Ethan, a 2.5-meter mako shark had been patrolling the deeper water approximately 100 meters from his position. Makos, among the fastest sharks in the ocean with recorded bursts of speed exceeding 74 kilometers per hour, possess exceptional sensory capabilities that allow them to detect prey movements from considerable distances. As Ethan secured his catch and reloaded his spear gun, a mako shark, drawn by the wounded snapper's distress signals and guided by its ampullae of Lorenzini, homed in on Ethan with uncanny accuracy. Weiramu, watching from the boat, saw only a flash of blue-gray before the water exploded in white foam. The mako closed the distance in under 7 seconds, striking with such speed that it propelled both itself and Ethan several meters through the water. Ethan described feeling an impossibly fast impact against his left thigh before registering pain. The shark had struck him with its snout before twisting to bite, a common attack pattern for makos when targeting fast-moving prey. The initial collision stunned Ethan momentarily, but his training immediately triggered his emergency response. Rather than panicking, he released his catch bag while simultaneously drawing the knife he kept strapped to his calf. The shark, however, had already redirected its attention to the free-floating catch bag, which continued to emit the distress signals from the speared fish. This momentary diversion gave Ethan the opportunity to kick powerfully toward the surface, leaving a trail of blood from the laceration on his thigh. Weiramu, seeing the blood in the water, immediately started the boat's engine and maneuvered closer to his partner. He extended the boat hook toward Ethan, who grabbed it with both hands. With remarkable strength, Weiramu pulled Ethan aboard as the mako circled back, its dorsal fin cutting through the surface just meters from the boat before disappearing into deeper water. Once aboard, Ethan's professional composure allowed him to assist Weiramu in applying a compression bandage to his wound, a 30-centimeter gash that, though deep, had miraculously missed his femoral artery. Weiramu radioed for emergency assistance while steering the boat at maximum speed toward Mangonui Harbor, where an ambulance was already waiting when they arrived 22 minutes later. At Kaitaya Hospital, Dr. Aroha Henare, a surgeon with experience treating shark bites, cleaned and assessed Ethan's wound. The laceration required 42 stitches across 3 tissue layers, but no arterial repair was necessary. Dr. Henare noted that the wound's clean edges suggested it resulted from a glancing bite rather than a sustained attack, consistent with the exploratory nature of many shark encounters. Marine biologist Dr. Cameron Robertson from the University of Auckland's Marine Science Department later interviewed Ethan about the incident. Dr. Robertson explained that mako sharks, while capable of extreme aggression, typically attack only what they perceive as prey. The shark likely mistook Ethan's wetsuit and movements for those of a wounded seal or large fish, particularly given the presence of actual wounded fish nearby. After 6 weeks of recovery and physical therapy, Ethan returned to diving, now always with a safety diver nearby. He incorporated the lessons from his experience into his teaching, stressing proper catch management and equipping his students with shark-resistant catch bags he developed. The Mangonui Harbor Master introduced new shark awareness protocols, including a flag system for recent sightings. For local spearfishers, Ethan's encounter underscored the ocean's unpredictability and the need for constant vigilance. A year after the incident, Ethan collaborated with New Zealand's Department of Conservation to develop educational materials about shark behavior and attack prevention, turning his frightening experience into an opportunity to promote safer coexistence between humans and these essential marine predators. The morning of April 15, 2025, began like any other day for the crew aboard the USS Steadfast. The naval vessel was conducting routine exercises approximately 30 miles off the California coastline, with clear skies and relatively calm waters creating perfect conditions for their training operations. Lieutenant James Harrington, a 10-year veteran of the Navy, supervised a group of sailors as they performed standard maintenance inspections along the ship's starboard side. At 0900 hours, Petty Officer Marcus Collins was leaning over the edge of the deck, examining a hull section flagged for inspection in yesterday's report. The 28-year-old sailor from Nebraska had joined the Navy 5 years ago, seeking adventure beyond his landlocked hometown. What happened next would provide more adventure than he had ever bargained for. Without warning, the ocean's surface erupted in a violent spray of white foam. A massive shadow emerged beneath the waves, a 21-foot great white shark, one of the largest specimens ever recorded in these waters. Before Collins could react, the enormous predator breached the surface with astonishing speed and power, its massive jaws clamping around his torso. Lieutenant Harrington looked up at the sound of the splash just in time to witness the horrifying scene unfold. The shark's momentum carried it partially out of the water, revealing its immense size to the stunned crew members. In an instant, Collins was yanked from the deck and dragged beneath the waves, his shocked expression barely registering what was happening. Panic erupted across the deck. Sailors who had been calmly going about their duties moments before now scrambled in different directions, some rushing to sound the alarm. In contrast, others grabbed nearby equipment useful in a rescue attempt. Chief Petty Officer Ramirez, supervising another team nearby, immediately took control of the situation, barking orders to initiate emergency protocols for a man overboard. Beneath the surface, Collins found himself in a desperate struggle for survival. The initial bite had torn through his wetsuit but miraculously missed inflicting critical damage to his vital organs, instead gripping primarily the thick material of his gear. The murky water swirled around him as the shark began its instinctive feeding behavior, dragging its prey deeper before starting to consume it. Drawing on his naval training, Collins fought against the instinct to panic. He knew that struggling wildly would trigger the shark's predatory response further. Instead, he directed his efforts toward the shark's sensitive snout and eyes. With his right hand, he struck the predator's gills, one of the few vulnerable areas on the animal's otherwise armored body. The shark, perhaps surprised by its prey's resistance, momentarily loosened its grip. It was all the opportunity Collins needed. With a powerful kick, he broke free from the weakened hold and began swimming toward the surface, each stroke fueled by pure adrenaline and the desperate need to breathe. Above water, the crew of the USS Steadfast had mobilized with remarkable efficiency. Within minutes of the attack, a rescue team led by Lieutenant Harrington had deployed a rigid-hull inflatable boat. Chief Medical Officer Patricia Rodriguez stood ready with emergency medical supplies, her face set in grim determination as she prepared for what she might encounter. As Collins broke the surface, gasping for air approximately 20 yards from the ship, he immediately began waving his arms and shouting for help. Blood from his wounds spread through the water around him, a dangerous signal that could potentially bring the shark back to finish what it had started. At the helm of the rescue boat, Petty Officer Dwayne Jackson spotted Collins and immediately steered in his direction. The crew was acutely aware that every second counted, not just because of Collins' injuries, but because the blood in the water made a second attack increasingly likely. As they approached, they could see the massive dorsal fin of the Great White circling back toward their injured comrade. With remarkable precision, Jackson maneuvered the rescue boat alongside Collins, just as the shark made its second approach. Seaman First Class Emily Chen reached over the side, grasping Collins's outstretched hand, and with the help of 2 other crew members, hauled him aboard moments before the shark's jaws snapped shut on empty water. Collins collapsed on the floor of the rescue boat, his breathing labored but steady. His wetsuit was torn across the midsection and right leg, with lacerations visible beneath the shredded material. Remarkably, none of his wounds appeared life-threatening. The shark's initial bite had caught mostly the thick neoprene of his gear rather than flesh. The return to the USS Steadfast was tense but swift. As they approached, medical teams stood ready on deck. Dr. Rodriguez quickly assessed Collins's condition as he was transferred from the rescue boat. The sailor had sustained multiple lacerations to his torso and right thigh, with significant bruising from the pressure of the shark's jaws, but no critical injuries to major blood vessels or internal organs. Rodriguez and her team worked methodically in the ship's medical bay to clean and suture Collins's wounds. The sailor remained conscious throughout the procedure, his voice steady as he recounted the attack to Lieutenant Commander Wilson, who had been dispatched to get a preliminary report on the incident. News of the attack spread quickly throughout the vessel. For many of the younger sailors, this was their first direct encounter with the raw power of nature at its most primal. The incident was a stark reminder that despite their advanced technology and military training, they were still visitors in an environment where creatures like the great white shark reigned supreme. Captain Robert Montgomery, the commanding officer of the USS Steadfast, ordered an immediate review of all overboard safety protocols. He also contacted marine biology experts to report the shark's unusual size and aggressive behavior. As such, a large specimen was rare in these waters. By evening, Collins was stable and resting comfortably, already regaling his fellow sailors with the tale of his encounter. The ship's mood had transformed from shock to relief, though a new respect for the ocean's dangers had been firmly established. Marine biologists later theorized that the unusually large shark might have been drawn to the area by changes in water temperature affecting its prey patterns. The incident would later be documented in Navy safety protocols as one of the most significant recorded shark encounters in naval operations history. For Petty Officer Marcus Collins, it was an experience that would leave both physical scars and an incredible story of survival against one of nature's most formidable predators. The coastal town of Gansbaai, South Africa, has built its reputation as the Great White Shark capital of the world. For most visitors, this meant an exhilarating opportunity to view these magnificent predators from the safety of cage diving expeditions. For the Petrov family from Moscow, however, it would become the setting for an unimaginable tragedy. It was the year 2007. Dmitry Petrov, a 42-year-old investment banker, had planned the South African holiday as a special treat for his wife Elena's 38th birthday. Their 10-year-old daughter, Katya, an enthusiastic young naturalist who collected shark teeth and devoured marine biology books, had been particularly excited about visiting a place famous for its shark population. The family had arrived in Cape Town 3 days earlier, spending time at Table Mountain and the Cape Peninsula before driving to Gansbaai for what was supposed to be the highlight of their trip. The morning had dawned clear and beautiful, with gentle breezes and sunshine that sparkled across the waters of Walker Bay. The Petrovs had booked a cage diving expedition for the following day, but decided to spend their first morning enjoying the scenic public beach near their rented holiday cottage. The area was not known as a swimming beach. Locals tended to avoid it due to the nearby seal colony that attracted great white sharks, but no explicit warning signs were posted that morning. Dmitry had settled on the shore with a novel while Elena and Katya decided to cool off in the shallow waters. Both were strong swimmers. Elena competed at the university level in Russia, and Katya inherited her mother's natural affinity for water. They waited approximately 30 yards from shore, where the water reached just above Katya's waist. From his position on the beach, Dmitry occasionally glanced up to check on his wife and daughter. The water was remarkably clear that day, with visibility extending several feet below the surface. Nothing seemed amiss as Elena showed Katya how to float on her back, supporting her daughter with gentle hands as they laughed together. The attack occurred with such speed that witnesses later struggled to describe the sequence of events. One moment, the mother and daughter were floating peacefully. The next, the water around them erupted as a massive great white shark, estimated later by marine biologists to be approximately 16 feet in length, surged upward from the depths. The predator's initial strike targeted Elena, its powerful jaws clamping around her right leg with devastating force. The woman's scream cut through the peaceful morning air as she was briefly lifted out of the water by the shark's momentum. Katya, only an arm's length away, instinctively reached for her mother just as the shark released its first bite and swung back around. On the shore, Dmitry dropped his book and jumped to his feet, his mind struggling to process the nightmarish scene unfolding before him. Other beachgoers froze in horror as they realized what was happening. The distinctive dorsal fin and thrashing water left no doubt that a large shark was attacking swimmers. The second strike caught Katya as she tried to reach her mother. The shark's teeth tore into the girl's side, pulling her under the surface. Elena, despite her catastrophic injuries, lunged toward her daughter, maternal instinct overriding personal safety and pain. For a terrifying moment, both disappeared beneath the churning, blood-stained water. Dmitry charged into the surf, but two local men intercepted him before he could swim out. Their physical restraint was the only thing that prevented Dmitry from becoming another victim, as his training as a former competitive swimmer would have quickly carried him to the attack site. Fortunately, two lifeguards from a neighboring beach had been practicing rescue maneuvers nearby. Upon hearing the commotion, they grabbed their rescue boards and paddled toward the attack site. Their arrival likely saved Katya's life, as the shark had withdrawn temporarily after its second strike. A common behavior pattern where the predator retreats to allow blood loss to weaken its prey before returning to feed. The lifeguards reached Elena first. She was barely conscious, but still calling her daughter's name. Her right leg had sustained catastrophic damage, with arterial bleeding that had already turned the surrounding water crimson. The first lifeguard, Thomas Kumalo, applied an emergency tourniquet using the leash from his rescue board while helping Elena onto the board. The second lifeguard, Sean Murray, located Katya floating face down approximately 15 feet away. The girl had a massive wound extending from her right hip across her lower back. Murray flipped her over, confirmed she was still breathing, and quickly positioned her on his rescue board. Both lifeguards began paddling toward shore, constantly scanning the water for signs of the shark's return. By this time, someone had called emergency services. Beachgoers formed a human chain extending into the shallow water to help bring the victims ashore quickly. Dmitry collapsed beside his wife and daughter as they lay on the sand, his anguished cries echoing across the beach. A retired nurse who happened to be present immediately began administering first aid, focusing primarily on controlling the catastrophic bleeding both victims had sustained. The ambulance arrived 12 minutes after the attack. Paramedics worked frantically to stabilize both patients before transporting and administering blood products and intravenous fluids. Elena had lost consciousness by this point, her skin ashen from blood loss despite the emergency interventions. Katya remained conscious but in shock, her small body beginning to shut down from trauma and blood loss. Both victims were airlifted to a hospital in Cape Town, the nearest facility with a level 1 trauma center. Elena was immediately taken to surgery, where medical teams fought to repair the massive vascular damage to her leg. Despite receiving multiple blood transfusions and the efforts of a skilled surgical team, she suffered a cardiac arrest 3 hours into the procedure. Resuscitation attempts continued for 27 minutes before she was pronounced dead at around 3:45 p.m. Katya underwent 8 hours of surgery to repair damage to her kidney, liver, and extensive soft tissue injuries. The surgical team was ultimately able to stabilize her condition, though her recovery prognosis remained guarded. She would require multiple follow-up surgeries and extensive rehabilitation. Dmitry maintained a vigil at his daughter's bedside, devastated by the loss of his wife, and terrified that his daughter might still succumb to her injuries. When Katya regained consciousness 3 days after the attack, her first question was about her mother. The moment when Dmitry had to tell his daughter that Elena had not survived was described by attending medical staff as heartbreaking beyond words. Katya eventually recovered enough to resume many normal activities, though she would always bear the physical and emotional scars of that terrible day in Gansbai. The experience transformed her childhood interest in marine biology into a passionate commitment to understanding the delicate balance between human safety and marine conservation. This path would eventually lead her to become a respected marine biologist, specializing in predator behavior. Over the past decade, great white shark activity has sharply risen in the waters off Cape Cod. On a crisp September morning in 2014, the United States Coast Guard Cutter Sturgeon crew, a 45-foot Coast Guard response boat out of Provincetown, was running a search and rescue drill about a mile off Nauset Beach. Lieutenant Commander Patricia Wilson had scheduled the exercise to train her team for water rescues in high-risk areas. Petty Officer Second Class Jason Harper, 29, a strong swimmer and 5-year Coast Guard veteran, volunteered to play the role of distressed swimmer. Floating in a wetsuit about 20 yards from the boat, he waited while the crew prepared for retrieval. 15 minutes into the drill, Seaman Andrea Morales looked out on the port side and spotted movement beneath the surface. At first she thought it was a school of fish or a seal common in the area. Then it shifted toward Harper, and she realized it was a large shark. She shouted a warning, identifying its position relative to Harper. Wilson immediately ordered the retrieval protocol. Petty Officer Ryan Delaney turned the vessel toward Harper. Hearing the alert, Harper swam steadily toward the boat, careful not to splash, a tactic known to minimize attracting sharks. The shark, later identified as a juvenile great white around 12 feet long, approached from below. No one saw the moment of impact. Harper later said he felt an enormous pressure around his right leg before being yanked under. The shark bit mid-thigh, its jaws clamping with thousands of pounds of force. Harper's neoprene wetsuit and the shark's exploratory behavior, rather than a full attack, helped prevent worse damage. Drawing on training, Harper punched the shark's snout and eyes. The animal released him confused, allowing Harper to surface. Petty Officer Michael Chen saw Harper go under and resurface amid a spreading cloud of blood. The drill turned into a real rescue. Wilson ordered Delaney to position the boat between Harper and the shark, now circling back. Rodriguez and Morales deployed the rescue cradle. Chen tracked the dorsal fin, cutting toward them about 30 yards away and closing. Harper, bleeding and in pain, used his arms to swim the last few feet to the cradle. Rodriguez and Morales hauled him aboard as the shark made a second approach. Back on deck, Harper's injuries were clear. Semicircular lacerations around his thigh, blood pumping from the deepest wounds. Seaman Emma Parker, the medical specialist, applied a combat tourniquet and cut away the wetsuit to treat the injury. Wilson calmly reported the situation to base. Confirmed shark attack, significant leg trauma, en route to dock with ETA of 12 minutes. Parker stabilized Harper, started an IV, and monitored for shock. His skin was pale and his blood pressure dropped, but he remained conscious. Despite the pain, Harper joked and apologized for ruining the drill. Wilson gave a tight smile and told him to save it for the report. At the dock, emergency medical technicians were waiting. The transfer to the ambulance took less than 4 minutes. Given the severity of the injury, including a nicked femoral artery, Harper was taken to a hospital in Hyannis. Surgeons operated for over 5 hours to repair the damage. The timely tourniquet saved his life by slowing arterial bleeding without causing long-term tissue loss. News of the attack spread quickly through Coast Guard channels and local media. Harper's family flew in from Oregon. Wilson gave a short press briefing emphasizing that shark attacks were still rare, even with rising sightings in the area. Marine biologist Dr. Marcus Sandoval reviewed the case. He concluded the bite was exploratory, likely caused by the shark mistaking Harper for a seal. Had it been predatory, the injuries could have been fatal. Recovery was long and painful. Harper underwent multiple surgeries and months of physical therapy. Psychological trauma was equally difficult. He dealt with nightmares and anxiety tied to open water. The incident shook the Cape Cod Coast Guard community. Local officials increased shark monitoring and public education, balancing beach safety with respect for the region's thriving shark population. The rugged coast of Northern California, where the Pacific Ocean crashes against jagged cliffs and frequent fog blankets the shoreline, the USS Monterey, a Virginia-class submarine, surfaced on April 7, 2025. Lieutenant Commander Ezekiel Thornridge had ordered standard maintenance procedures in relatively shallow waters, approximately 25 miles west of Bodega Bay, an area known for its diverse marine life and occasional great white shark sightings. The region had a long history of naval operations dating back to World War II, though shark encounters with military vessels remained exceptionally rare. This particular stretch of coastline was part of the California Current ecosystem, where upwelling created nutrient-rich waters that supported a complex food chain, including seals and sea lions, which were preferred prey for great whites. The crew members on deck reported unusually clear conditions that morning. Chief Petty Officer Lakshmi Rajagopal supervised the external sensor diagnostics, while Ensign Octavio Mendoza monitored the surrounding waters. The maintenance followed protocol, until Ensign Mendoza spotted an unusual shadow moving beneath the surface approximately 50 yards from the submarine. According to later reports filed with Naval Command, what happened next occurred startlingly. Later estimated to be over 18 feet in length, a massive great white shark emerged from the depths and directly approached the submarine. The creature, weighing approximately 2 tons, struck the vessel's port side with surprising force, causing several crew members to lose their footing. Petty Officer Darnell Washington, who had served on 3 previous deployments, stated he had never experienced anything like it. In unprecedented aggression, the shark circled back and bit down on one of the external hydrophone sensors. The specialized equipment, designed to detect acoustic signatures underwater, attracted the shark's attention. The metallic crunching sound reverberated throughout the submarine's hull, causing momentary alarm among the crew below deck. Lieutenant Commander Thornridge immediately ordered all personnel to clear the deck and implemented emergency protocols. The submarine's security officer, Lieutenant Francesca Wilkinson, documented the encounter using the vessel's external recording equipment, capturing remarkable footage of the massive predator circling the submarine. Marine biologist Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka, who later reviewed the footage, concluded that the shark was likely an older female specimen. Dr. Tanaka theorized that the submarine's electromagnetic signature, combined with the vibrations from maintenance activities, might have triggered the shark's ampullae of Lorenzini, specialized electroreceptor organs, causing it to mistake the vessel for potential prey. This theory aligned with the submarine's mission objective, testing new stealth technology that might have inadvertently emitted frequencies attractive to certain marine predators. After approximately 7 minutes of circling and occasional contact with the hull, the shark eventually lost interest and descended into deeper waters. Though the encounter caused no structural damage to the submarine, Lieutenant Commander Thornridge delayed the completion of maintenance operations by 45 minutes to ensure the area was clear. Naval Intelligence Officer Commander Sophia Blackwood noted that while sharks occasionally investigate ships and submarines, an aggressive encounter was rare. The USS Monterey's crew subsequently completed their maintenance and submerged without further incident, resuming their training exercises later that afternoon. The crew's conflict wasn't merely managing the immediate threat, but also determining whether their new stealth technology had somehow provoked the attack. Chief Engineer Valentina Kozlowski immediately began analyzing sensor data to determine if electromagnetic emissions from their experimental equipment had inadvertently created what amounted to an underwater dinner bell for predators. The incident prompted the U.S. Navy to implement enhanced protocols for surface operations in areas known for shark activity. A specially designed electromagnetic deterrent system was later approved for testing on submarines operating in shallow coastal waters with known populations of large marine predators. Captain Marcus Reynolds, spokesperson for the Pacific Fleet, emphasized that while the encounter was unusual, it highlighted the importance of naval personnel remaining vigilant about all potential hazards, including those presented by marine wildlife. The footage captured during the incident was incorporated into training materials to prepare submarine crews for similar situations in the future. Lieutenant Commander Thornridge recommended modifications to the experimental stealth system within the classified sections of the after-action report. The engineering team, led by Chief Kozlowski, redesigned certain components to eliminate frequencies that might attract large marine predators. This adaptation represented an unforeseen challenge in developing next-generation naval technology, nature finding unexpected ways to interact with human engineering. Ensign Mendoza, who had spotted the shark initially, later received a commendation for his attentiveness. His quick notification to superior officers allowed the crew to respond promptly. When interviewed months later for an internal Navy publication, he expressed amazement at the creature's power and size, but maintained that such encounters could be managed safely with proper training and awareness. The USS Monterey continued its deployment without unusual wildlife encounters, completing its mission in late May 2025. The modified stealth system performed as expected during subsequent tests, and no additional shark encounters were reported. The incident became a legend for the crew, evidence that even with cutting-edge technology and rigorous training, the ocean could still surprise humanity's most sophisticated vessels. The encounter between predator and submarine ultimately improved naval operations and marine biology research. Dr. Tanaka's team received funding for new studies on great white shark sensory capabilities, while the Navy incorporated biological considerations into their technology development process. What had begun as a potentially dangerous encounter evolved into a catalyst for both scientific advancement and enhanced naval preparedness in shared marine environments. On the western coast of Réunion Island, a French overseas department in the Indian Ocean, the morning of March 17, 2020, began like many others for 36-year-old Julien Alexandre Martel. The tranquil waters off Saint Paul, a popular tourist destination known for its pristine beaches and coral reefs, had been Martel's destination for his annual solo retreat since 2015. Réunion Island, located east of Madagascar, had gained notoriety over the previous decade for an unprecedented series of shark attacks, prompting local authorities to impose swimming and surfing restrictions across much of the coastline. The island's unique geography created perfect conditions for shark habitation. Deep water close to shore, underwater canyons, and a marine reserve established in 2007 that allowed fish populations to recover, subsequently attracting larger predators. Between 2011 and 2020, the island recorded over 20 shark attacks, several fatal. earning it the unfortunate nickname Shark Island in international media. Martel, a renowned freediving instructor from Lyon with 15 years of experience and multiple national records, had arrived on the island 3 days earlier for a 2-week retreat focused on deep training and underwater photography. His professional reputation had been built on pushing boundaries safely. He had trained military special forces in advanced freediving techniques and authored a respected manual on breath-holding psychology. According to witness statements later collected by the Maritime Gendarmerie, Martel had been advised by local fisherman Pascal Bourquin about recent tiger shark sightings near the entrance to St. Paul Bay. The fisherman had spotted a large tiger shark, estimated at over 4 meters, feeding on sea turtles just 2 days prior. Despite this warning, Martel dismissed the concern, explaining to Bourquin that he had extensive experience diving in shark-inhabited waters and understood their behavior patterns. On the morning of the incident, Martel departed from Bouquin-Cano Beach at approximately 6:30 a.m., heading northwest toward a deep-water training spot he had used during previous visits. He wore a distinctive blue and black wetsuit and carried his standard freediving equipment, carbon fiber fins, a low-volume mask, weights, and a yellow surface marker buoy attached to him by a 10-meter cord. The sea conditions were calm with excellent visibility, typical of the transitional period between the cyclonic season and the cool, dry winter months. Martel had informed the owner of his beachfront accommodation, Eliane Dumont, that he would return by mid-morning for a video call with his fiancée, Céline Roux, who planned to join him the following weekend. This call never took place. At approximately 8:45 a.m., kayaker Théo Nguyen, paddling about 300 meters offshore, noticed an unusually large splash and what appeared to be a brief struggle in the water near Martel's marker buoy. Nguyen, a medical student from Paris who was vacationing on the island, later reported seeing a large dark shape moving away from the area and a spreading red stain in the water. Recognizing a potential emergency, he immediately paddled closer while calling the coastal emergency number on his waterproof phone. The St. Paul Emergency Response Team, well practiced in shark incident protocols due to the island's history, dispatched a rescue boat within minutes. They arrived to find Martel's surface marker floating unattended, its cord severed. Initial search efforts revealed no sign of the freediver. 4 hours later, fragments of Martel's wetsuit and a section of his weight belt washed ashore at Roches Noires Beach, approximately 2 kilometers north of his diving location. Maritime authorities, led by Commander Philippe Lecomte, immediately launched a comprehensive search operation involving boats, jet skis, helicopters, and drone surveillance. With Martel still missing by late afternoon, the operation shifted from rescue to recovery. Marine biologist Dr. Maureen Leclerc, from the island's Shark Risk Reduction Center, examined the recovered wetsuit fragments and confirmed the bite pattern was consistent with a large tiger shark, known scientifically as Galiocerdo cuvier. A fisherman discovered Martel's mask and some of his diving computer floating near the harbor entrance the following day. Data extracted from the damaged device confirmed Martel had completed 3 successful dives that morning, reaching depths of up to 47 meters. The 4th dive recording terminated abruptly at 8:43 a.m. at a depth of 12 meters, likely during his ascent. News of Martel's death spread quickly across the island and throughout the international freediving community. His fiancée, Céline Roux, arrived 2 days later to identify his personal effects. She shared with investigators that Martel had been aware of Réunion's shark situation, but had expressed confidence in the statistical improbability of an encounter. In her statement to authorities, she revealed that he had been planning to establish a free diving school on the island, believing that proper training and protocols could make the waters safe for experienced divers. The tragedy reignited fierce debates between conservationists and safety advocates on the island. Local business owners, whose tourism-dependent livelihoods had suffered from the island's dangerous reputation, renewed calls for systematic shark culling. Environmental groups countered that tiger sharks were vital to the marine ecosystem and emphasized human responsibility when entering predator territories. Réunion's prefect, Amaury Delavalade, announced enhanced restrictions on water activities following the incident, extending the existing ban to cover freediving in previously exempted areas. The local government also accelerated funding for the Smart Shark program, which combined spotters, drones, and underwater acoustic monitoring to create an early warning system for shark activity. 1 week after the incident, a memorial service attracted over 200 attendees, including prominent figures from the international freediving community. Fellow instructor and close friend Marc Dupré eulogized Martel as someone who understood and accepted the ocean's risks while pushing human aquatic potential to its limits. In the months following Martel's death, his incomplete manuscript on freediving psychology was posthumously completed by colleagues and published under the title The Last Breath. It became a standard reference in advanced training programs. Some proceeds established a foundation promoting research into non-lethal shark management strategies for island communities worldwide. The tiger shark believed to be responsible was never positively identified. Marine researchers noted that, unlike great whites, tiger sharks are known for their unselective feeding habits and ability to bite through the hard shells of sea turtles, making them particularly dangerous when encountering humans in their environment. For Réunion Island, Martel's death represented the 23rd shark attack in a decade, reinforcing its unenviable status as one of the world's most dangerous locations for water sports enthusiasts. On the northeastern coast of New Zealand's North Island, Orewa Beach stretched for 3 kilometers of golden sand and gentle surf, attracting tourists and locals to its accessible shoreline just 40 kilometers north of Auckland. The morning of March 12, 2014, began as countless others had for 45-year-old Greta Annika Lindholm, a Swedish expatriate who had made New Zealand her home 14 years earlier, after falling in love with both the country and her now husband, during what was supposed to be a 6-month working holiday. Orewa Beach has a long history as a popular holiday destination, and its development boomed in the 1950s as Auckland's northern suburbs expanded. The beach was generally considered safe for swimming, and shark encounters were extremely rare along this stretch of coastline. Lindholm, a financial analyst for a sustainable energy company in Auckland, maintained a strict morning routine regardless of weather conditions. Each day before sunrise, she would drive from her home in nearby Silverdale to Orewa for a 3-kilometer ocean swim parallel to the shore. This discipline had earned her quiet admiration from residents who observed her clockwork appearances, even during winter, when the Tasman sea temperatures dropped considerably. According to multiple witness accounts collected by Sergeant Madeline Fraser of the Orewa Police, Lindholm arrived at her usual parking spot near the beach's northern end at approximately 5:45 a.m. That morning's weather conditions featured a light offshore breeze with a faint pre-dawn glow, beginning to illuminate a thin coastal fog, common during autumn mornings in the region. Lindholm exchanged brief greetings with elderly beachcomber Harold Watkins, who walked his border collie along the shore each morning before entering the water at her customary spot. Watkins later reported to investigators that Lindholm had seemed completely at ease, maintaining her usual routine of stretching briefly before wading into the gentle surf. She wore her characteristic bright blue swimming cap and rose-tinted goggles, making her visible despite the dim lighting conditions. The ocean appeared calm, with modest swells of less than a meter. Approximately 20 minutes after Lindholm began her swim, when she had reached a point estimated to be 150 meters offshore, 2 early morning joggers, university students Liam Chen and Aroha Wiramu, heard what they described as a sudden splash and brief shout. Through the thinning fog, they observed turbulent water and what appeared to be a violent disturbance where Lindholm had been swimming. Chen immediately called emergency services while Wiramu ran to alert the lifeguard station, which wasn't scheduled to open for another 2 hours. By extraordinary coincidence, off-duty lifeguard coordinator Thomas McGregor had arrived early to prepare equipment for a training session. Upon hearing Wiramu's urgent report, he immediately launched a rescue board and paddled toward the swimmer's last known position. Upon reaching the area approximately 7 minutes after the initial disturbance, McGregor found only Lindholm's swimming cap floating on the surface and a spreading slick of blood in the water. He conducted a rapid search pattern but found no further sign of the swimmer. Within 30 minutes, police and emergency services had established an incident command post on the beach. The Westpac rescue helicopter, equipped with thermal imaging technology, arrived from Auckland to assist in the search while police vessels patrolled the surrounding waters. Senior Constable Derek Waitu cordoned off the beach and interviewed witnesses while marine biologist Dr. Clinton Riley from the nearby Goat Island Marine Reserve was called to assess the situation. By mid-morning, additional evidence had washed ashore: Lindholm's torn goggles and a fragment of her swimsuit. Dr. Riley conducted a preliminary examination and confirmed the damage patterns were consistent with a large shark bite, likely from a great white shark, Carcharodon carcharias. DNA testing of biological material found on the items later confirmed Lindholm's identity and the presence of great white shark saliva on the fabric. The disappearance shocked the close-knit coastal community, particularly given the rarity of shark attacks in New Zealand waters. The country had recorded only 13 fatal shark attacks since 1852, with the most recent occurring in 2009 at Wangamatta Beach. Marine scientists speculated that the unusual presence of a great white in these waters might have been related to changing ocean temperatures and shifting migration patterns of seal populations, the shark's preferred prey. When informed of his wife's presumed death, Lindholm's husband, Eric Johansson, collapsed and required medical attention. In subsequent interviews with authorities, he revealed that his wife had recently discussed seeing what she thought might have been a large fish during her swim the previous week, but had dismissed it as possibly a dolphin. Friends described the couple as devoted to each other and active in environmental causes, having met while volunteering for a coastal conservation project. The beach remained closed for 5 days, while authorities conducted intensive aerial and underwater searches. No further trace of Lindholm was found, though a fisherman reported seeing a large shark approximately 2 kilometers offshore the following day. After consultation with marine experts and the Swedish consulate, authorities officially declared Lindholm deceased on March 18th, citing overwhelming evidence of a fatal shark attack. The incident prompted significant changes to swimming safety protocols in the Auckland region. The Orawa Surf Life-Saving Club, with financial support from the local council, instituted earlier morning patrols during summer months, installed an advanced shark monitoring system using underwater acoustic receivers, and tagged sentinel sharks to provide early warnings of large predator activity. A memorial service held on Orawa Beach 2 weeks after the tragedy attracted over 500 attendees, including members of Auckland's Swedish community and Lindholm's colleagues. Her husband established the Greta Lindholm Ocean Safety Foundation, which funded research into shark deterrent technologies and provided scholarships for marine biology students, focused on predator management systems that protected humans and sharks. Marine biologists noted that the attack bore the hallmarks of a case of mistaken identity, with the fog potentially obscuring the shark's vision and Lindholm's regular swimming motion mimicking a seal from below. Dr. Riley emphasized in public statements that such tragic events remained extraordinarily rare, with humans facing far greater dangers from rip currents and drowning than from shark encounters. The following summer, a permanent memorial in the form of a tasteful stone bench was installed overlooking Lindholm's favorite swimming spot. The bench bears the inscription, "The ocean gives us life. Sometimes it takes a life. Remember Greta, who loved these waters." Her husband continued her tradition of environmental advocacy, working to ensure her death would lead to greater understanding rather than fear of the marine environment she had cherished throughout her life.